In 2017, Google did something that surprised everyone. They sold Boston Dynamics. They were the most famous robotics company on Earth. Viral videos, millions of fans, and decades ahead of the competition. But behind the hype, they were a company in crisis. They had built the most advanced machines ever, and nobody could figure out what they were actually useful for. So why did Google give up on them? To understand why the world's best robots almost failed, we have to go back to the very beginning. Meet our main character, Mark Rybert. In 1980, Rybert was an MIT professor who realized that the way we were building robots was fundamentally broken. At the time, robots worked by basically following a very precise script. They could follow instructions, but they couldn't adapt. Rybert's breakthrough was something called dynamic locomotion. Instead of pre-programming every move, he built robots that behaved more like animals. They didn't think about walking, they just reacted to it. Every leg had sensors measuring lean, speed, and force. If the robot started to tip, it didn't need to wait for a command from a computer. It would just adjust and stay balanced on its own. And suddenly, these robots didn't look stiff or controlled anymore, they looked alive. In 1992, Rybert developed this research into his own company, Boston Dynamics. But you might be surprised to hear that for the first decade, they really weren't a robotics company at all. They made their money through government contracts, building software like DI Guy, which simulated human movement for military training. The robots were still just a side project in the back of a lab. The technology was finally there, but Rybert still faced the one problem that would haunt the company for the next 20 years. What do you actually do with a robot that can walk? Fast forward to 2003. DARPA, the branch of the Pentagon that funds high-risk futuristic technology, decided it was time to take robots out of the lab. They had a specific problem. More than half of the Earth's landmass is impossible to reach with a wheeled or tracked vehicle. If you want to carry gear over a steep mountain or through a thick forest, you need legs. At the time, Boston Dynamics had the most advanced robotic legs in the world, so they got to work. The result was Big Dog. If you were on YouTube around 2008, you probably remember this thing. Instead of falling over like every other robot would, Big Dog was able to recover and stay standing. It didn't look like a machine anymore, it looked like an animal. DARPA was impressed enough to give Boston Dynamics a $33 million contract to build a battlefield version called the LS-3. It was a beast. It could carry 400 pounds of gear and hike through mud or snow at an incline. On paper, it was exactly what the military wanted. But in the real world, it had one massive problem. To get that much power and range, they had to use a gas engine. And that engine was loud. In a combat zone where you're trying to stay hidden, the LS-3 was basically a giant alarm bell for the enemy. So the military eventually walked away, saying they couldn't use a robot that gave away their position from half a mile away. After years of development and millions of dollars, Boston Dynamics had built a masterpiece that they couldn't sell. They had the technology, but still no customer. So instead of trying to fix the noise problem, they decided to try something even harder: building a humanoid. Now, building a robot with 4 legs is hard, but building one with 2 that walks like a human is even worse. With 4 legs, you have a stable base, but when we walk, we're basically in a constant state of falling forward and catching ourselves. Their first attempt was Petman. It was a high-tech test dummy used to see how military chemical suits and camouflage held up while moving. It could walk on a treadmill, but it had to be held up by a huge overhead crane and a bunch of cables. It proved they could mimic human movement in a robot, but it wasn't a standalone product yet. That changed in 2013 with Atlas. Atlas, once again, was built for a DARPA challenge, this time a challenge based on the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The idea was to build a robot that could go into areas too dangerous for people, but still use human tools, climb stairs, and open doors. And Atlas could actually do it. It was 6 feet tall and weighed over 300 pounds, and there was a catch. While the viral videos made it look like the future had arrived, the reality was still pretty messy. Atlas was incredibly expensive. It used high-pressure hydraulics that would leak, and it still needed a massive leash or power cable to stay running for more than a few minutes. Boston Dynamics didn't even win the DARPA challenge. Another team with a slower, more practical robot did. But once again, Mark Rybert had pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but he still hadn't built a product. And this is where Google entered the picture.
Google, the internet search engine, is entering a new frontier. It's bought a cutting-edge robot technology company.
In 2013, Google started buying up robotics companies. They were building a new division led by Andy Rubin, the guy who created Android. robots could eventually be the future of labor. So Google went on a spending spree, buying Boston Dynamics and 7 other robotic startups all at once. Google had money and Boston Dynamics had the best hardware on Earth. But in reality, the two companies had very different goals. Google is a software company. They're used to building apps and code that can be updated in a day. They wanted a product that could actually ship and be put to work in a year or two. But Boston Dynamics was not there yet. They were still focused on research. They were building one-of-a-kind prototypes that cost millions of dollars each and needed a full team of engineers just to stay running. By 2016, that conflict was clear. Andy Rubin had left Google, and the company realized they were pouring money into a project that wasn't going to make a profit anytime soon. So, in 2017, they decided to cut their losses and put Boston Dynamics up for sale. It was a huge blow. If the biggest tech company in the world couldn't figure out how to make money with these robots, who could? The writing was on the wall. Mark Rybert and his crew might soon be out of a job. But then, a Japanese company called SoftBank stepped in. SoftBank wanted products, and they knew how to get Boston Dynamics there. No more building prototypes just for the DARPA challenges or potential government contracts. Now they had to build something people would actually want to use. That shift had already quietly started a couple years earlier, when in 2015 Boston Dynamics introduced a fully electric Spot. It might not seem like it, but this was a huge turning point. By switching from gas engines and hydraulics to electric motors and batteries, the robot became much quieter and easier to manage. For the first time, they had a machine that they could actually operate indoors around people without being a nuisance or a safety hazard. But the hardware was only half the battle. Around this time, they acquired a company called Kinema Systems. This gave them the 3D vision and brain their robots needed to actually understand the environment around them, allowing them to navigate around obstacles and pick up objects without a human guiding every single move. As they were implementing these improvements, they were still pushing the limits of their research. In 2017, they released a video of Atlas doing a backflip. It went everywhere. It kept the world's attention while they were quietly building Spot into a tool for the real world. And in 2020, it finally happened. After nearly 30 years of research, Boston Dynamics put Spot onto the market. Now, Spot wasn't for the average person. It was expensive, and companies mostly used it for simple things like site inspections or security. But it worked. It proved that a legged robot could exist outside of a lab and provide actual value to a customer. The science project phase was finally over. Boston Dynamics was officially a business. Finally, things were starting to come together. In 2021, Hyundai bought a majority stake in the company for $1.1 billion. But this was different from the Google or SoftBank deals. Hyundai isn't just an investor, they're a customer. They run massive car factories and warehouses, which means Boston Dynamics had a real-world environment to test the robots in. They're literally building for the owner's assembly lines. Around the same time, they doubled down on their robot brain, putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a new AI research institute. Mark Rybert stepped down as CEO to lead it. It's almost like the company split in two. One side is now handling the business and the factories, while Rybert's team keeps working on the long-term autonomy and vision problems. And we're already seeing the results of that. They recently retired the original hydraulic Atlas, the one from all the parkour videos, and replaced it with a fully electric version. It's thinner, it's quieter, and it's way more agile than its predecessor. The goal for this new Atlas isn't to show off on YouTube. Hyundai is planning to put it to work inside their factories to do real, repetitive labor alongside people. After 30 years, movement and balance weren't the main problem anymore. The challenge was finding a place where these robots actually belonged. Now, for the first time, they have customers, a factory to work in, and a clear reason to exist. Boston Dynamics was founded when Mark Rybert tried to solve one basic problem: movement. How do you build a machine that can walk in the real world without falling over? Over 3 decades, they've figured that out. But as it turns out, the engineering wasn't always the hardest part. It was figuring out what to actually do with these robots. For years, Boston Dynamics was a company full of incredible ideas and prototypes, but they didn't actually have a product. That's why Google decided to sell them. They bought a research lab when they wanted a robot factory. Today, that's finally changing. Boston Dynamics isn't just building robots that can move anymore. They're building robots that have somewhere to go. Whether it's Spot inspecting a power plant, or the new Atlas moving parts in a Hyundai assembly line, the technology finally has a purpose. Boston Dynamics didn't win by building a better robot. They won by finally giving their robots a job.